So this PowerPoint provides you with some great examples of how design elements are used in photography and what you should be looking for when you are describing or analysing a photograph. And another thing I want you to take notice of for future studying is referencing your material. So whenever possible, you should try to include all the information about your images as well as your source. And this might be a website or a book or a journal that you've used. So there are particular referencing systems used by different institutions such as Chicago and Harvard and APA systems, but for now, just making sure you include as much detail as possible will be perfectly fine. Okay, so in your textbooks, I think it's page 148, they describe design elements as the features that you use when you create a photograph, and that these will influence the aesthetic value of your image. Aesthetic value is what makes the image pleasing to look at, or what gives it its beauty, or really what makes us like an image. So there are lots of different elements of design, but we'll be focusing on line, shape, tone, texture, pattern, form, space and colour. And sometimes you might concentrate on one design element, or you might use a combination to achieve the design qualities in your work. Alright, so let's start with line. And if you read the definition in your textbook, you'll see that line has endless possibilities to use within an image. So in this image, the photographer has used line to lead your eye to the focal point, and he's also taken advantage of the pattern and repetition that the line has created. So notice that there are many variations of how line is represented. And once again, the photographer here has used line to lead our eye to the focal point at the end of the path, but he's also used the repetitive line of the mangrove roots and trunks either side of the path to add interest to the image. And don't forget the lines created by the boards in the path that get thinner and shorter as the path recedes from our view. Some of the lines here are more of a suggestion as the line of people disappears out of the image. So line has also been used in the buildings and the horizontal and vertical lines of the windows, and not to mention the lines created by the crosses. So when we refer to colour, we're generally looking at how colours are structured around the colour wheel. And the textbook suggests that colour can play a significant role in the aesthetic quality, there's that word again, aesthetic quality of an image, giving an object solidity and form, as well as enhancing the emotion, mood and atmosphere of a photograph. So the primary colours, which most of you probably know this anyway, are red, blue and yellow, and the secondary colours being orange, green and purple. Now the colours that appear opposite to each other on the colour wheel are called complementary colours, because when you put them next to each other they look really good. And the colours that are next to each other on the colour wheel are called harmonious colours because they appear similar. And generally we refer to warm colours as red, yellow and orange, and the cool colours as blue, green and purple, although you can have warm greens, blues and purples just as you can have cool yellows, reds and oranges. So in this image, the photographer has used colour to create atmosphere. By using many colours, there's a feeling of abundance and happiness through the variety and luxury of a multitude of colour. And we also get a sense of fun through the brightness of the colour. And here the photographer has focused on using complementary colours with the inclusion of purple and yellow. So you can see the striking contrast that these two colours produce when they're placed next to each other. So the other ones you would see are other complementary colours are blue and orange and red and green. So this next slide, this one shows how harmonious colours are used, and also by introducing the complementary colour to red. So we see all the warm reds, yellows and oranges, and then we have the green leaf as a focal point that draws our eye. So when we think about shape in photographs, we use shape to give structure. Shapes are usually considered to be two-dimensional, but by adding tone we give the shape form or make it 3D. We can simplify shape by removing detail or using a variety of shapes to add interest. So here the photographer has used a multitude of shapes. So we've got both 2- and 3-dimensional, organic and geometric, hard and soft-edged. So in this image, the photographer has used shape with the silhouette of the people's bodies attached to the dark curve of the land, in contrast with the shape of the water and the sky. And the horizon line also creates definite shapes of the water and the sky. Shape has been simplified here with the repetition of similar two-dimensional shapes, diminishing in size into the background of the photo. So when we think of texture, we think of what the surface of an object is like. So this is what gives shape, tone and form a tactile quality, or tells us what something might feel like. Our textbook says that it can add depth, character and realism to an image, and that and ways that we can describe texture are rough, smooth, sharp, soft, furry, prickly, pitted, dull, shiny or grainy. So in this image, the photographer has contrasted the soft waves of the girl's hair with the hard, rough texture of the walls and the pathway. In this instance, the photographer has used a variety of textures produced by the plants, adding interest and different areas of the photo for the eye to move to. And here we see a contrast between the soft organic texture of the sheep's face compared to the sharp woven texture of the wooden panelling. So we move on to form, which is basically how we refer to a three-dimensional object. So this is usually determined through light and dark areas. So when light hits an object and puts part of it in shadow, we can then identify form and volume. So it's the direction of the light that affects our feelings towards an image. Now, different applications of light will change the form of an object in an image, changing the aesthetics and changing how we feel about a photograph. So I want you to just try and imagine how this shell might look as a silhouette, similar to the baobab trees or the people in the earlier slides, in the shape slides. So then think about how the photographer has considered the way the light hits it to ensure the best representation of the subject. So in this image, the photographer has captured this man's hands as time-hardened and work-worn, providing the viewer with an incredibly detailed form. And the lighting is quite soft, providing a feeling of peacefulness. However, the form is sharp and tells us the hands belong to a hard-working older man. So it is still important to pay attention to light and shadow and how they give the object a sense of depth. So this applies to colour in form as well as black and white. So we move on to tone, which is a very important element, particularly in black and white photos. So you should aim for a black area, a white area, with a variety of grey tones. And this depends on what you're trying to create. So if you're just using grey tones, you would have a completely different effect compared to using high contrasts of black and white. So this image is a good example of how we have the stark contrast of the black and white in the foreground, and then the soft variety of greys as we look into the mist and the fog, creating a different atmosphere again with the photograph. Now this image shows great contrast between dark and light tones. It gives the image a look of harshness and spontaneity. So this image is a fantastic example of how tone can be used with colour. So here we see how a vast range of cool blues have been used to create a feeling of coldness and mystery. And incidentally, Andrew Pearce is a local photographer. So with pattern, we can use this to create rhythm, harmony and compositional structure. So we can use pattern as the main subject of a photo or to help with the design of an image. And we usually associate pattern with decoration or something that reflects aesthetic qualities in a picture. So here the photographer has captured patterns created by nature. So they're all different. However, there is unity because there is the common theme of pattern. And we see pattern here in the continued stripy pattern in the chair and the woman's leg. So the variation of the stripes adds interest and movement in the photo. So you can see those curved stripes there in the back of the chair, the straighter ones in the seat, and then you've got a different type of stripe again in the stocking. The element of pattern is evident in various ways within this photo. So first you have the spotty motif on the in the fabric of the dresses, and then you have the patterns of the shoes, and then there's also the pattern created by the legs and feet, all pointing to the centre of the photo. So in space, in photography, when we refer to space, we're referring to the idea of depth in an image. And to create this impression, we need to rely on some of the other elements such as tone, colour, line and shape. Creating an element of space allows us to see deep into an image by creating a background or restricting us to a shallow space or providing no evidence of space at all. And we could use perspective with a vanishing point, which can be helped with tone, creating darker objects in the foreground and lighter, less detailed objects in the background. Overlapping objects and enabling us to look through objects also gives us awareness of space. So this image gives us the impression of a vast amount of space in providing very little in terms of objects within the photo, and a large amount of light with the horizon way a long way off in the distance. This image just gives us a view of a room being photographed, or a gallery by the look of this, and it also allows us to look through into another room, so giving us that idea that space continues on behind this room. This image gives us the impression of a vast amount, using positive and negative space effectively. The man occupies the positive space and the black background around him, even the chair which blends into the background, is the negative space. So hopefully you're all more aware of how you can use design elements to describe photos and also use it as a tool in creating your own images.